Hello, how's it going? This is Liberty and Independence channel. I thought I would make a video today, a personal video, the first personal video on the channel. I was listening to a podcast and it really kind of pissed me off. People don't often understand the political spectrum. They were talking about Nazi skinheads, which Nazis are socialist. Much to the dismay of many socialists out there, they don't want to admit that Nazis are socialist. If you just read Mein Kampf, Hitler will tell you he was a socialist. Much to their dismay, they don't want to admit that. So they call socialist far right, and they refer to themselves as on the left. In reality, that's not accurate. Here's the political spectrum. On the very far right, the more right you go, the more freedoms you have. So on the very far right, you have anarchy. Okay, you go a little farther, you have direct democracy, which doesn't work because 50% of the population will always vote the other 49% out of their rights. If you go into the middle of the political spectrum, that is what our government consists of: a constitutional republic, not a democracy. Anytime you hear our representatives call us a democracy, they are uneducated and incompetent. We're not a democracy. We never have been a democracy. John Adams once said, "A democracy soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself." There has never been a democracy that did not commit suicide. So I'm in the middle of the political spectrum, like the founding fathers were, leaning a little bit to the right. Now, if we're going to continue the political spectrum, to the left, you have socialism, and to the very far left, the radical left, you have communism. So the farther right you go, the more freedoms you have. The farther left you go, the more authority and tyranny, arguably, that you have. See, that's what these people don't want to admit. That's why these people that are uneducated, they have these degrees, but they are uneducated on the principles of politics. They want to sit there and say, "Oh, the skinheads are far right, far right." No, they're not. That's just you showing your ignorance and uneducation. These skinheads are far left because they're Nazis. Nazis are socialists. That's far left. They don't want to admit that because they call themselves leftists. Liberals do. Which is hilarious because classical liberalism would actually be on the right, not the left. But in order to admit that, they would have to admit their own ignorance. Anyway, so this is Independence Day. It's my favorite day of the year. This was the only country and the first country on the face of the earth that ever set the common man and woman free. For the first time in history, they had ever been set free. And we're going to read the most important document, not only in the history of this country, but in the history of mankind. And it's the Declaration of Independence. In Congress, July 4th, 1776. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitles them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That when any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is of the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such a form as to shall them as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing inevitably the same object, advances a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sovereignty of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless these people would relinquish the right of the representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable only to tyrants. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of